Hi, Andy. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. So Andy's laughing a little bit because before we started the episode, I was struggling with the sentence as simple as, "Hi, Andy. How are you?" And then I went into this long explanation about how I make mistakes on podcasts too. So anyway, listeners, maybe you don't know, but now you know that making a podcast is not as easy as it might sound. Even as long as I've been doing it. Okay, so here we have Andy Judd. Andy and I have not met, so this is one of my favorite ways to do a podcast because I approach it with the kind of the natural curiosity of somebody, meeting for the first time. So very nice to meet you.
Likewise.
But I've done my research on you, and you have such a cool Instagram page. And for those listeners who don't know you, Andy does your hair on Instagram. So, of course, I strongly recommend that everybody check you out. You're super creative. You're a Nashville hairdresser who focuses on creative, quirky hair, as you like to call it. In fact, I'm going to go to your Instagram profile because I love the way that you worded it. You describe your style as romantic meets quirk meets queer meets punk, which is just awesome because then you scroll down and you're like, oh my God, that's like the perfect description of your style, which is so creative. And, in our industry, we need this. We need creativity. We need things to be shaken up sometimes. And, so anyway, I strongly recommend that everybody check you out, which is why we have you on the show. So we're going to get into everything about you. You also have in your Instagram bio, all new clients book as transformational cut. I want to start with you describing why you put that on there.
Totally. Basically, a transformational cut gives me an extra half hour. It allows me to have a longer consultation. Also, typically, if somebody is seeking me out for the first time, they want a pretty big change. And so the extra time is helpful. I don't want to be rushed.
Sure. And would you say most of that extra 30 minutes is kind of in the consult at the beginning to see maybe just how far you can take the new client, or is it in the actual work?
I think it's a mix of both. I think the consult definitely is longer when you are meeting somebody. It's like multiple baby first dates, and then you have to deliver a, creation that they're asking for in a short time frame. And I book on an hour basis for a traditional haircut. So an hour and a half for the new client / transformational cut. Also, I do a lot of dry cut refining after the shape has been built in and stylized. So I do feel like it gives me just extra time to look at it and focus and then kind of think about, is the proportion correct? Is the way it will grow out correct? Because typically my clients go between 6 to 8 months with a haircut.
Wow.
So I like to have it, make sure that I can do what we do.
That's really unique. 6 to 8 months between cuts.
Yeah, well, so their full haircut. I offer a dry maintenance haircut, whereas that's my version of a bang trim, which is a 30-minute appointment. But when I do bangs, the whole head, whole half of the head in the front is bangs. I said that wrong. The whole front half of the head is bangs. And sometimes it's the back, it's bangs as well. Mm-hmm. So I need more than just a 15-minute appointment for a bang trim. So sometimes if people want to maintain a fringe that's shorter, they'll come in for that every once in a while. But honestly, I do feel like a lot of people just let it grow out into a curtain and go a long time.
That's super interesting. And I guess I can see that with these shapes. Because they're so unique, and I could see over a couple month period of time it almost becomes like a different cut, but it still maintains its quirkiness. Mm-hmm. So at this point, and we're gonna get into your story, but before we get into your story, I just want to get a feel for where you are now in your career, which is, I imagine, not where you started, but
totally.
where you are now is where. Is a situation where most of the clients who come to you, they do want a very creative cut, right?
I would say majority, yes.
And that's because that's kind of what you're putting out there. I mean, they go to your gram, and this is not like your typical, let's call it 48-year-old mom who like long lunches. I mean,
Totally.
what right? Like what kind of clients, like what are most of your, what's like the profile of most of your clients? Like what do they do for a living? How old are they?
Well, I'm in Nashville, so a lot of my clients are musicians or artists. I do feel like Nashville, because I'm in East Nashville, which is not downtown. It's more the kind of underground art scene, I guess, if you would call it. It's a little less mainstream, basically, a little less honky tonk, and people are like into some other references. But the musicians that come to me, they want a look because they're trying to market themselves in an industry that is very visual. Also, like in the art community, a lot of people are just down to experiment and play, which is actually sometimes I take models for artists a lot. We're also surrounded by Belmont University, so I will reach like kind of like in a college town every 4 years. A new young group of people kind of cycle through who are trying to grow into their careers. And I find it a perfect opportunity to kind of consistently have new models and also like new people. And then I can show what I want to produce out to the world. And then in return, people just come to me for that.
Super interesting. Okay, so Belmont, I'm a little familiar with Nashville. I've been there a couple times, most recently maybe 6 months ago, and of course it's changed so much since COVID. I mean, half the people in California have moved to Nashville, right?
That is true.
I mean, it is wild. I was there for like 5 days. And the first 20 people that I met there, whether it was like the barista at the coffee shop or the server at the restaurant or from California, it was almost like somebody was playing a joke on me. But
Right.
but you guys have gone through a big transformation, and I'm sure you've gotten a lot of young and creative people moving in. But Belmont College, is that, what kind of school is that? Like liberal arts?
So they're known for their music.
Okay.
Process. So it just draws a lot of that, a lot of
Got it.
performers, who want to have cute hair when they're on stage.
And how, given that, you've got every year, you've got a new set of freshmen coming in. How do you, is it word of mouth? Is it Instagram mostly? Is it TikTok? How do they find you?
It does tend to be either word of mouth or Instagram. TikTok, not so much. I think I'm a little like I haven't tapped into that world of demographic. It feels too casual to me and I struggle with it. But also I view Instagram as like a portfolio creation, not a way to speak into my phone and kind of share my thoughts on like the industry or anything like that, which TikTok is better for that. I kind of like to go to work and shut off and then have creative time with editing. And that's what it's about for me.
Yep. And it shows super well on Instagram. You're doing a great job there.
Well, thank you.
So let's start with, where are you from? Nashville, and tell us where you're from and how you got into this industry in the first place.
Yeah, so I'm from Ohio, a really small town. I grew up across the street from a cornfield, like really, really real, not much going on. But I was close to Cincinnati, so I ended up in Cincinnati at one point. But I went to college originally in Rochester, New York for advertising photography and photojournalism. I was there for a year and a half and I was like, yeah, no, maybe this isn't for me. I grew up not really financially wealthy. And we lived with my great grandmother growing up, like in her house, because the opportunities were less with spending a lot of money on a college to get a degree in photography that I would then be in debt for basically forever.
Right.
So I was like, okay, this isn't going to work for me. How do I take the elements of what I like with photo, which ended up being getting the models ready, and more of like the stylizing. I would always imagine from a photo standpoint what the hair looked like on the model. And I was like, oh, well, that makes sense. Okay, I need to kind of start thinking about that side of the career, but then also doing photo on the side. And this was a little bit before Instagram had its like big boom. So I kind of got lucky in the way when I went to hair school, I just was already in the habit of taking a lot of pictures. So I just documented everything from hair school in photo and just consistently started out with that. So my entire career has just been natural to take photos of everything that I do.
Yeah, and it it absolutely shows. But I have to go back to the cornfield because
Yeah.
Matt Beck. I don't know if you know Matt Beck of Free Salon Education. He has, you know, his origin story was shucking corn as a youngster.
Okay.
I don't think he was from Ohio, but he was from a neighboring state. I don't remember exactly, but he tells a story of, I think he was maybe 12 or 13 years old, where he was expected, along with all the other kids, to get up and go shuck corn at 4 a.m. Did you ever do that?
No, I did not. I did
Okay.
not. Yeah, we were surrounded by the cornfield, but my, I grew up. My parents were divorced, so I was like half part time with my dad, half part time with my mom, and neither of them are very into farming country life. My mom's a very like kind of a. We were listening to pop music while everyone else was listening to country in my little small town. That's the vibe.
Okay, so you're a little alternative from the get.
I guess so. I don't know if we were very. I wouldn't consider us alternative by any means, but I just think that we didn't fall into like maybe exactly the town vibe.
Got it. Okay, so you started off as a creative. You wanted to do photography. You started wrapping your creative mind around photo shoots and stuff, and that kind of that created a foundation for you getting into hair. So you went to beauty school, and were you good at it, or did you struggle, or how was it in the beginning?
I was the worst in my class by
No.
far.
Come on.
No, for real. No, it's true. The first thing I learned was sectioning, and that took me forever to like understand, which is silly now because it's just a very natural part of the process. But I didn't have experience doing hair, and all of all the girls that was in my class, they were already cutting hair, they were styling their friends' hair, they had a foundation of understanding of what it was, not just admiring it in the way that I was, but I had no practice. So it took a while for my hands to catch up. For sure. I was like, I like this. I have no idea how to do it.
Funny. But the fact that you liked it meant that you were willing to keep going and learn it.
Yeah. So before I even left college, I was going to a barbershop / salon in Rochester that I ended up just asking if I could be more involved or see the space before I left, because I just like, if I'm going to make this decision, I want to know what a day-to-day is like. And I know they did things outside of just working behind the chair. They had a education career, all of that stuff.
Okay.
So I interned there, unpaid, which is not something I stand by now. I don't think anybody should ever do that. What I did, it was a year and a half of unpaid. It was wild. So I was a hair school and intern throughout the whole time.
But it's so smart. And I kind of did the same. And that was my entree into the industry. I worked for free for a year with a salon owner, and a longtime salon owner. And he was probably 60 years old at the time. And I think I recognized that I was bringing very little value to the situation. I almost begged him, to just hang around. That's kind of how it started. Can I just hang around and learn? But yes, I think ideally somebody should. And I mean, there's laws around it now, but
right.
Depending on the state. But super smart that you had the insight to think to yourself, if I'm going to go to school and I'm going to make this a career, I want to know kind of what I'm getting into.
Absolutely. I didn't, in my mind, I didn't want to fail, which is something that I'm always trying to not do. Basically, I hold myself to a really intense, sometimes impossible standard of what I feel like I should be doing or how I should be. But at the time, especially when I was in college, I did not want to be a college dropout. I just thought that was ultimately like, I was just really raised to be, you go to school and then you finish. But I knew that it didn't feel right for me. and I knew that financially it wouldn't make sense in the long run. I knew I wouldn't enjoy it, and I was like, okay, if I'm going to leave this, I can't be a failure at what I go do. I have to go and fully 100% commit to it, and I want to make sure I'm making the right decision.
Right, right. Okay. I mean, those are principles. Oftentimes in these conversations with somebody new, we always try to siphon out principles that lead to your success, and of course that's one of them. Commitment, making a commitment to something. And I have 2 little kids, and they're like new humans, and it's my responsibility to teach them certain things that are going to help them be happy and successful and satisfied in their lives. And one of them is, when you make a commitment to something, you stick to it, grit and tenacity and things like that. So that's what you're going into, and super valuable. All right. So you go to beauty school. By the end, did you still feel like you were behind the 8 ball, or did you still feel like the girls were better than you, or what?
In some ways, yes. And in other ways, I knew that I was observant in the way that maybe some of their technical skills in various, in color and cutting were stronger than me. But I knew that through my internship, I understood what a consultation was, and I was really heavily trained on styling with like blowouts. So I knew that I could do those. And then everything else, I was like, okay, I'm going to commit myself to I just want to learn a haircut that I can market, maybe build on that, learn another look that I can market, before I try to expand and do everything. And I wanted to market one thing really well, basically, from the get-go.
What was that? I love that.
Oh, it was long layer haircut with waves. It was nothing overly exciting to me now. However, it was a great foundation for what I do now. So I was doing that, and I was like, okay, there's a clientele for this. I know that when I get out of school, when I get into a chair, I'm going to be doing haircuts for very inexpensive, and I know that I need to start gaining a clientele. So that's what I did. I focused really heavily on that. I was doing a lot of heat styling at the time, which is funny because I rarely do it now. Long layers, really flowy hair. And then I started doing more really short, pixie haircuts.
Okay.
And marketing that as well.
After how long? After how long did you kind of transition from that kind of long layered haircut that you knew was easy to market, you knew a lot of ladies wanted it, to thinking to yourself, okay, I'm going to branch out?
It was about 1.5 to 2 years after I was licensed.
Okay.
Because I had moved from where I was interning to a paid position as a junior stylist, and I went through his apprentice program, which he was new to it and he was developing it. I was the only one. We had a really hands-on, and at the time his perspective was incredibly dry cutting focused. So I had a dry cutting background. He taught me how to do dry cutting long layers and bobs and everything like that. But then I was like, okay, I want to offer something different to the salon that is a whole, because then how can I compete with the only other person who's more experienced than I am and is still teaching me all of these things? What can I present to this space, since it was just the 2 of us, that he doesn't, so that way I can diversify my own clientele? And that started working out really well. And then we worked with a color line at that time that just kind of, there's this Kuhn. I worked with Kuhn in Rochester, and they have a point-based system. So it was the first time hair color clicked with me just from a photo background. There's the Munsell color theory and all of that foundation of how to explain color on a level and saturation chroma based situation. Does that make sense?
Yes, it makes sense. And so I was waiting to transition into the color that you do, because we've only talked about cutting and your creative, quirky cuts, but I didn't want to leave out the creative color that you do, because anybody who goes to your Instagram is going to immediately see how creative it is. And so you started dialing in your color skills in this internship with this guy, and it was a 1.5 year internship, you said?
Yeah, so I had moved from my internship to my paid position.
Okay.
So when I went through the apprentice program really heavily, learning like haircutting and then building on color with his name's Ben in Rochester, and I was there for about a year and a half to 2 years, and then I moved to Ohio.
I'm curious how you found Ben. Was it through Kuhn?
No, I found Ben because at my spot that I was interning at, I left because the internship turned into more of like I work the front desk and I have a schedule, but I'm not getting paid,
Right.
and I was like,
Right.
I can't.
You were doing real work. You got to the point where you were doing real work and you weren't getting paid.
Exactly. So I was
Yeah.
like, this doesn't make sense. They promised me a chair, then they filled it, and so there's no chair for me either. I was like, yeah, this
Oh.
is not great.
Right.
So I was just honestly scrolling through Instagram, really looking around at other salons. I saw his work and I saw where he was, and I knew from his post that he was opening a salon soon. And it was his first time opening it. So we just kind of met and had coffee, and we got along really well. Yeah, and I just knew that it was a potential. Also, being able to witness somebody open a salon and go through all of that process, I was involved with like every step of the way, basically. For the role that I have now with Local Honey, I offer a background knowledge of things that a salon owner might know or experience without ever having that actual experience of owning it myself. Does
Yeah.
that make sense?
No, 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like, for some people, it's obvious. For most people, it's not. But there's nuts and bolts things that you have to do when you open a salon. There's, you got to get the stations on the wall, or you got to get the stuff delivered, and you have to figure out how big the mirror is going to be, and it can't be too big, and then you have to hire people, and you have to deal with the landlord. Maybe you aren't doing that. But you have to make sure that the electrical capacity is sufficient so that everybody can run their blow dryer at the same time. There's like lots of technical things nobody thinks about, but you were there in the beginning of that, which gave you the experience of it. So I can see you're at a salon in Nashville now called Local Honey. That's what you mentioned, and so you probably bring a little bit more fundamental knowledge of just like managing a salon than maybe the average hairdresser.
I would hope so. They have their systems in place from before I ever was there.
Sure.
But I've been there for 6 years now, and building into that role, I'm on the leadership team. I'm the associate creative director. I think in leadership teams, we're currently in the process of looking at what we have and what we do and how to simplify our processes. And it's helpful that I have experience in that, but also on the creative side, have experience from a whole photo standpoint. So I know both of those things.
Sure. Okay, so talk about the transition into these transformational types of shapes that you do.
Yeah, so when I moved from Rochester to Ohio, that was the first time I kind of had the green light to experiment really with what I wanted my perspective to be. I had a foundation of I understand how to cut hair in a way that I know I can deliver on. What can I push? What can I do something that's mine? So basically I would look at reference photos and I'm like, okay, cool. This is a really cute haircut. What would my version of it be instead of how do I replicate that? And that dramatically changed my mindset entirely. And that's really was the start for me creating what I do now as a hair cutting foundation.
So before you keep going, what you're
Yeah.
describing is kind of oftentimes in our industry, a more experienced hairdresser will get upset at a younger, newer hairdresser who doesn't want to learn any rules. They just want to break them all before they learn them, and they want to do creative cuts right out of the gate. And the more experienced hairdresser is always like, no, you need to know the fundamentals first. You need to know the rules in order to know how to break them and where to break them, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was great. In Ohio, that was the first time I picked up a razor, and that's primarily my tool of choice with cutting now. Although I do use a feather razor, I'm not into, cutting my fingers off. So, I think that's a whole other topic, but people get really intense about straight razors versus a feather razor. And it comes from a mindset that I just don't think their arguments are accurate.
Okay, so where did you learn how to use a straight razor?
I just played with it myself. I've literally never had a class on it. I did watch at a hair show. What was his name? Oh, I watched Nick Arrojo at like a hair convention in Chicago. Just cut hair for like hours, basically. It was just like he was on the side of the convention, just taking models. And I was familiar with their branding, and I was like, oh, I love these haircuts. How are they getting these effects? It was the first time I saw anyone cut with a razor and also anyone diffuse hair, which is wild to me that I never saw that before. But I was like, oh, that's an amazing effect. So I really was inspired to just try it out. My boss, Cassie, at the time at that show, just kind of saw how inspired I was. So she bought me my first feather styling razor. And
that's nice.
Yeah. And then that's been passed down now. It's very cute the way all of that happened. But started learning.
In the trial and error process, is that on mannequin heads? Is that on humans? Is that on your friend, or how did you do that?
It was on people.
Nice.
I didn't push it too much in the way of like it made to preface, I will say when I first grabbed the razor, it was the first time that haircutting made the most sense to me. As in, like, I like to use it like a pencil and sketch with it. Mm-hmm. So basically, I would like sketch my shapes in, like when it's wet, very like roughly. And then with my dry cutting background, I would tweak anything that needed to be tweaked. Over time, I've narrowed that space in. Mm-hmm. But that's really how it started. But I wasn't trying to push anything. I still wasn't doing the heaviest layering situations or anything like that. I was just introducing it into my world. I was also watching videos online just through Instagram. If you see people use it, like, I understand how to remove weight with shears. Let's try to remove weight with the razor and see what that does. But I was really gentle with it. So I wasn't out there just like, woo, like we're going to, cut off all this hair immediately. But the more confident I got with it, the more and more it just grew.
Okay. And so that allowed you to broaden your skill set. And probably was maybe one of the fundamental things that you do now.
It absolutely set me up to what I do now for sure, especially with haircutting, because I met my partner in Ohio and we moved to Nashville to work at Local Honey together. So we work side by side. We had the exact same schedule. And we knew at the time there was nobody in Nashville marketing haircuts in the way that we wanted to grow our perspective. So we were like, okay, perfect. This could be a great fit. We know they do a lot of photo shoot based things because he also had a background in photo as well, but dropped out of school to do hair. We have the exact same story. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
We also grew up 20 minutes away from each other. It was
wild. God.
Yeah. But so when we moved to Nashville, I started focusing more on Shags. Was really the number one thing I was really starting to market. Started building a clientele off of that, pushing that then into, honestly, I was like, I live in Nashville. I live in the South. The mullets are going to be a thing. I'm going to make anybody who has a mullet in Nashville, I want everyone to know that that's like something I do.
I love it.
And it was just kind of like out of fun to begin with, and it really just started off from that. And now, at the time, a mullet was quirky. I don't consider it to be now, just based off of how popular. Yeah, look at you. Yeah, look at you. It looks great. It's made its way.
Right. I mean, I call it a mini mole. My barber calls it a mini mole. The listeners know who Dre is. Dre cuts my hair. And Dre Hair on Instagram, yeah. So we're actually growing the mini mole out a little bit. It's not so mini anymore.
It's amazing.
And then it kind of curls,
Yeah, it does a really cute little flippy.
Yeah. And tomorrow it's not going to be a cute flippy. It'll be like a wing or something. It's different every day.
Yeah, and that's the cool part about it.
Yeah.
I love that. I love natural
Thank you.
movement though, and that it's like different every
Yeah.
day. That's like what I encourage people to bring out. But yeah, so started marketing in that way. It just attracted really cool clientele. My haircuts at that time as well were lower than they are now.
Price-wise?
Yes. So where I could just really build a foundational clientele and experiment.
Can you tell us how much? You don't have to, but just to give the listeners an idea. Yeah, maybe like give the listeners an idea of kind of the scale.
A haircut timing was an hour and 15 minutes for every single haircut, and it was a $65 haircut, which is wild to me now. But coming from Ohio, that's what it was.
That's not cheap. That's on the upper level, right? I mean, for Nashville. Nashville back then, maybe, for a decent for the type of cut you do now, you're probably three figures. What do you charge now?
I'm at $165 for an hour. And then Transformational would, be closer to $2.
Yeah. Yeah. Girl or boy, right?
Anyone.
Matter.
Yeah.
Anyone.
I have genderless booking. A lot of my clientele are non-binary or trans. I like to offer gender inclusive rates and pricing and honestly and everything like that. But not to change the subject a little bit, but then to dive into color, if we want to get to that point, that's kind of how I've maintained basically if somebody comes to me, great vibe, we get along really well. I know that they want a fun look. But maybe the budget's not there to do a long, hefty color, but they're not even specific with what they want necessarily. They just are down to collaborate. That's when I'll reach out to my clients and ask them if they want to be a hair model for me or do a photo shoot model and build that way.
And so part of the discount, if you will, and the cost that they're going to ultimately pay is them spending the time with you to take pictures, right? And so how much time, if you're going to do a photo shoot with them, what are you asking them to do in terms of time?
Well, basically, you'd have to get the hair color done, which on average is 3 to 6 hours, depending on what we're doing. And then photo shoots some days they're typically like a 2 hour to 3 hour shoot. It's nothing wild. But if it's for a large event, not just like a local, my clientele, I do pay models. And the trade-off is more that they get the hair, we get to collaborate. And then if they ever have future ideas, they're always welcome to come to me with it. And it's a good relationship from there.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. Okay. So on your Instagram, so what percentage of these photos are models, would you say?
About 50% of the color of the creative color that we see are models.
Okay.
But all of the haircuts I don't take haircut models.
Oh, okay.
At this point, I just find that my day-to-day provides me with what I would even want to do as a haircut model. Okay. So I, for the past 3 years, have been in collaboration with Colorspace, the color line.
Okay. Not familiar with it.
Oh, it's fantastic. It was created in 2020 during the pandemic. Ray Chavello and Lupe Voss created it.
Oh.
And
yes, I have seen that. That.
It works beautiful. I love it. And I love them. They're just the sweetest. But I create content for them, so basically I have to take colored models, which is also a really great thing for me. Excuse me. Because I get to just consistently have a reason to push creating something. Whereas if I didn't have a reason, I don't know if I would be taking a model every single week to do like a big project on, you know?
Yeah.
But it's only made me better and more confident in what I do because I really just the past 3 years have started playing around with color in a very what you see now. I was really hyper fixated on just cutting just because I needed to build a career, and I started getting education opportunities with cutting. I was never really seen as a colorist, and it's been kind of wild now that I was like, you have to build the foundation of the house and you can paint it after. And that's where I feel like I'm at now.
Oh, that's totally your story. I mean, you just gave the metaphor right there. I think you've done a phenomenal job of taking one step at a time and making sure that, you build that, great first step, and then you spend a lot of time making sure you learn the rules, and you do a great job building the second step, and so on and so forth. And you can just imagine the way that you've done it, and I think it's so smart. And again, that's another principle. And maybe your principle of kind of, or at least your personal belief of commitment, and even if something might be annoying to you, learning a certain something, it's not always fun, right? I mean, when you get up in the morning and you're like, oh, I've got this thing to do today and I really don't feel like doing it, you do it anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of tenacity, grit, commitment, and that's part of layering in those steps to get to a higher level.
Yeah, well, thank you. It's very sweet. It's very nice.
That was a compliment, but mostly it's, we just like to boil things down. The goal of this podcast for the last 6 years has been to entertain, sure, to inform a little bit, but mostly to educate. And we try to, the education is the most important part, but hopefully people get entertained. They're still listening, so maybe they're entertained just enough. But that makes the education, not seem so much like school, and make it a little bit more fun. So, no, I think you're like an educator all wrapped up in one. You just kind of ooze, valuable information. So, no, this is awesome.
Well, wow, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that was sweet.
Okay, so here we are, 2024. This is the beginning of February that you and I are recording this. Who knows when this is going to drop, maybe the end of February. But you spend most of your time in the salon, if not all your time behind the chair. And what are you noticing with clients these days? Any changes from 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
It's been an interesting, I guess, past like half of 2023. A majority of my clients have moved in the past year, to be honest. A good percentage of them are in New York or LA now. So it actually feels like a rebuilding situation for me.
Hold on a second.
Yeah.
So we had an outflow. Again, I'm from LA. We had an outflow of people to Tennessee, and now there's a backflow.
Yeah. I think a lot of people in creative fields that are not necessarily music, a lot of my photographer friends, actually a lot of musicians, I think they just want different opportunity. I also think they want a different scene. It's a very tight-knit community here that offers opportunity, but I think they want to go somewhere where they don't know everybody, which makes sense. But it's been, it's not fun when you see a large portion of your main clientele leave. It gets a little anxiety inducing, but it's also an opportunity because the people who are coming to me now, they have different perspectives. And it's really fun and enjoyable to collaborate with them. I have the very, also people that I see who are regularly coming in. That is not something necessarily that I heavily advertise on Instagram, because I don't find that it harder to get, if that makes sense, in my chair. So I have more day-to-day stuff that, thank goodness I have them, because, they allow me to be able to still have a job.
Pay the bills.
Yeah, and it's enjoyable, and it's a lovely experience every time I see them. But there's also then some people who come in with completely different perspectives that, the trends are changing. I'm not seeing as many, it's fun because I think I'm kind of an out there hairdresser, and then the clients that I get are saying things to me that I'm like, okay, cool. That is wild for me, but yeah, let's do it. I'm into it. So I feel like the mom in Mean Girls, where I'm like, oh, you kids keep me so young. That's kind of like the age of 2024 that I'm in now.
I love it. I love it. And I mean, you're like all of what, 24 years old or something?
I'm 29.
You're 29, so
Yeah.
you're still very young, and that's super interesting. And I mean, you're getting college kids, so the younger generation is always going to. There's always going to be somebody younger, right? There's always somebody
Right.
younger, always somebody older, and yes, the younger ones keep us feeling young. I love the idea that you push a client into a more alternative haircut, and probably over time they start pushing you into more alternative directions. I think that's super cool.
It is very fun. Yeah, I do thoroughly enjoy it. I'm like, okay, there are some people I'm like, I never know where we're going to get today. And I love
it.
that. Yeah.
No, I love it. And I kind of feel myself in the same situation, although probably much less than really your example. But, some people look at my haircut and they're like, well, what is that called? And I think to myself, oh, I don't think of it as unique or different at all. But,
Yeah.
most people don't have a mini mullet. And so when I go to my barber, I often find myself thinking, okay, what can we change? What can we do differently?
Right.
And so it's just kind of the natural evolution. If you work in an industry that doesn't mind, a different kind of look, then why not just always kind of change and push it?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so what is something that you haven't done yet in your career that you've got in the back of your head? You're like, this is something I want to do.
I ask that's a tough question because I ask myself that all the time, right? I always kind of ask myself, like, how can I consistently push it? What are my goals? For a while, I thought like independent education and like going and traveling and teaching, basically wanting to have a class every month. And then I found that I still like to do education, but I don't like to do it to that scale that often. The reality is I know that I'm not going to be able to work behind the chair my whole life. So I know I need an exit plan. So I'm planning to hopefully figure that out now. What that looks like for me a little bit is I've become more involved in my local, like the salon, and in the stylists that I'm surrounded by on a daily basis. I do think that is something that I want to do more. Is I've never, and I don't think I'm ever going to be ready to be a mentor, but I've never been in the position to be able to offer just like an ear for somebody to like say the experiences they're having while they're growing in their career. And I want to be more involved in that this year. I want to take more personal vacations, to be honest. It's just been years of 100% work. So I feel like I'm at a position where I've neglected some of my like daily life things, and I want to get into that and find a healthier balance. Professionally, let's see. Every year I always enter hair competitions and do all of that stuff. It would be lovely to, I've been a finalist in like so many of them, but I've only won one. I'd love to win more. Just to be real, I don't know if I think that it ultimately matters to win. I just think that it'd be a lovely experience because I have entered for so long. So that sounds fun. Let's see. I want to create collections, to be honest with you. Like that's really, I want to play with wigs this year. That's something that I really want to get into. I feel like whenever I do create a collection, especially if we're gathering, like we did a runway this past year and, finding the models, going down and prepping every single person's hair color and everything like that beforehand is great. It would be lovely if we had some wig options available to be able just to like plop on and condense basically the prep time of things.
Yeah.
So
you could do things in advance.
Yeah. And I feel like it'd be fun to see what my perspective is without the influence of a collaboration between the person I'm working on their head. If it was just solely the hair and I had free reign completely to do anything that I wanted to, I'd be very curious to see what that would look like, because I don't know exactly right now what that would look like.
Interesting. Super. Well, everything that you've said, it makes a lot of sense given where you are on your arc. I mean, you're not even 30 years old yet. So I'm not surprised you don't feel like, you could be a mentor. You're probably too young, but there will become a time when it's going to feel natural, that you have something to give and you feel super excited about giving it. And yeah, so anyway, all that makes a ton of sense. If I handed you a magic wand, and you can change anything about the industry as a whole at all, what would it be?
Statewide licensing.
Statewide licensing. You're talking about state to state.
Yes. So basically,
countrywide, national license. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Countrywide licensing. I originally got licensed in New York. I moved to Ohio. I was able to transfer my license in from New York to Ohio, but I had to take the technical and written. But each state is a different technical. And there's no resources of how to learn that unless you go back to school. Or in my case, when I moved to Ohio, I reached out to a school and they let me shadow to learn, which was completely... they didn't need to do that. It was, and they really helped me out with that. But it shouldn't have to be a case-by-case scenario. You shouldn't have to get lucky. Also, then when I moved to Tennessee, 4-year work experience, 2 licenses in 2 states. They made me go back to hair school because I didn't have 5-year work experience. And when they tracked it back to your original state that you get licensed in, New York requires 1,000 hours. Tennessee requires 1,500. So they were saying, I don't care that you have 2 licenses. I don't care that you have 4 years work experience. You need 5-year work experience or 1,500 hours. So they made me go back to hair school for 500 hours. There's only one hair school in all of Nashville that allows you to go for makeup hours instead of needing the whole 1,500 because they're corporation based owned. They want everyone's money.
Right.
And then the one that let me go was the finances that the school had were incredibly minimal.
Okay.
To be honest, they shouldn't be open because it was just a mess. I don't know how to describe it. It was just a mess. And there was zero passion for it. And I felt really bad for anybody. Like, I had to pay to go. Anybody who had to pay because it's all they could afford. The education that was there, I don't know how they're going to be able to set anyone up for success. So from a personal standpoint, I have had the experience of having to take 3 different written and practicals. I've had to go to hair school twice. And I didn't know that was going to happen originally when I moved down to Tennessee. So I had already got my job at Local Honey. I had applied. We had moved. We were in the process of moving. I found out a little bit before I got here that, I am moving. Everything is set up for me. I can't actually make money. Thankfully, the salon let me work as a front desk operator to be able to make something. Yeah. But my partner, Joe, had 1 license in Ohio. But he was able, which is the same license I had, but was able to start working. And he had 4-year work experience as well. But he had 1,500 hours.
Oh, got it.
So Ohio and Tennessee are the same. So we have the exact same license, but they wouldn't let me. So, he had to support me for 6 months, 7 months.
Right.
It was wild.
It's super stupid. I've had this conversation with a few people who've been involved with licensing, throughout their careers. Gordon Miller comes to mind as, somebody who's had so many decades of experience in this industry across states and has been involved with some of the organizations that have influence in the industry. And he said, we've been trying to get reciprocal licensing between states for so long, but the reality is that it's nobody in the upper echelons of government cares enough to really move the mountains. I mean, you have 50 different states, and
Yeah.
they all want to have their own control over it. And that's just the way it is. There's been some kind of reduction in the requirements of licensing. Like, for example, in California, we're down to, I think, 1,000 hours now. I want to say when I started 23 years ago, I think it was 2,000, and then we went to 1,600. I'm forgetting exactly how it's changed, but 1,000 hours now. No technical, no hands-on test now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so people who are licensed here are like, well, that's bullshit because I had to do it. But is in terms of people who are trying to transfer their licensing, it's just totally ridiculous. If you've been working successfully in another state, you've been licensed, you haven't killed anyone with scissors,
Right.
why shouldn't you be able to work safely in another state? No, I totally get it. The reciprocation is what they call it. But anyway, no, you're 100% correct. So any last words for the community?
I guess just stick with what you're doing. And if it's not serving you, create a plan to figure out what you want to do about it, and then go for it. Everything that I've ever been able to do has been because I've just consistently worked at something. And I didn't know what I was working for, and I still don't. But if you're committed to growing your individual perspective on the industry, opportunities will open up in ways that, can lead to wherever. Yeah. And the opportunities are endless, basically.
And that's just a great summary of your story. And you've been successful, and it's been fantastic. I hope the listeners love your story. So thank you, Andy. It's great to meet you, man. And
likewise.
I hope to see you around at a hair show or whatever. And
yeah, if you ever come by Nashville.
I would love to. And I'll hit you up if I go back there. And if you ever make it to LA, let me know.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.